Hello. It's been a while since I have recorded a video of a sermon or a lesson, and that is partially because I have been on paternity leave, me and my wife, as most of y'all know, welcomed our daughter into the world about a month ago, Caroline, and she is doing well. We are doing well. We try to be doing well as we adjust to parenthood and her schedule, because Caroline just does not like to sleep through the night yet, so she wakes us up in the middle of the night to be fed, to be changed, all that wonderful stuff. All of that to say, thank you for those who prayed for us, who checked in on us, or who provided a meal during the past several weeks. We have felt so loved and so supported from friends and family during this time, and we just can't wait to see what God has in store for us as a family. But right now, I'm here to bring really the sermon of the week. We just had a crazy week at Rockford Lane Baptist Church, and we had a major curveball thrown at us. And so we had to do just quickly switch to a virtual format for the next 2 weeks. So here I am. I want to actually bring a message entitled Love Your Neighbor, and it comes from Luke 10, verses 25 through 37. Now, this is a parable that a lot of people know, that you will probably know right off the bat as soon as I start reading it, or by just the title of it. It's the parable of the Good Samaritan. A lot of people know that. Heck, even in our English language nowadays, Samaritan is used as a word to describe somebody who does good deeds. So we're very familiar with this parable. But let me read it real quick, and then I'm just going to do some points. I did not intend to try to go very deep into this parable. I just wanted to kind of read it, break it down, and give you really one main application point to it, and hopefully you can apply it to your life as you go on and as you try to become more like Jesus. So let me read this passage real quick. Once again, it's from Luke 10. We're going to start in verse 25, and we're going to go all the way to verse 37. So let me read that real quick. Then an expert in the law stood up to test him, saying, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" "What is written in the law?" he asked them. "How do you read it?" He answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and your neighbor as yourself." "You've answered correctly," he told them. "Do this and you will live." But wanting to justify himself, he asked Jesus, "And who is my neighbor?" Jesus took up the question and said, "A man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell into the hands of robbers. They stripped him, beat him up, and fled, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down that road. When he saw him, he passed by on the other side. In the same way, a Levite, when he arrived at that place and saw him, passed by on the other side. But a Samaritan on his journey came up to him, and when he saw the man, he had compassion. He went over to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on olive oil and wine. Then he put him on his own animal and brought him to an inn, and took care of him. The next day he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said, 'Take care of him. When I come back, I'll reimburse you for whatever extra you spent.' Which of these 3 do you think proved to be a neighbor to the man who fell in the hands of robbers?" "The man who showed mercy to him," he said. Then Jesus told him, "Go and do the same." So some very quick highlights of this passage. And it's the very first thing is that we see a testing of Jesus. Jesus' ministry lasts about 3 years, and as time goes on, he starts to really bump heads with the religious leaders more and more. And I think partly this is because like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were so close to getting it right. Like, they had this very good idea of what it meant to follow God and to follow his commands, but they deviated, and they just got off track a little So now as Jesus is coming onto the scene, as Jesus is teaching, the true way to follow God and to, live out his commands, now it's kind of really butting heads, because now the Pharisees are like, wait a minute, we thought it was this way. And they're just butting heads, and just the Pharisees, they're stubborn like us. When we get told we've done something wrong, or we've thought or believed something that was false, we kind of get not offensive, but defensive, and we're like, no way, you're wrong and I'm right. And that's really what the Pharisees are doing here. And really, as Jesus is going on, as his ministry, the Pharisees start to see him as a threat, and a threat to their power. And so we eventually know what happens. The Pharisee sets it up to where Jesus is sent to the cross to be crucified. But this is now just one of those sections where they're starting to butt heads, and this is kind of start leading up to where the Pharisees are trying to trap Jesus in his own words. They're plotting against him, they're trying to kill him, and they're trying to get him into like these sticky situations to where they can use his words against him in a trial. And as we see time and time again, Jesus used these situations. He doesn't, fall into the trap, but he answers their questions in such a way that it gives a very valuable lesson for us today. And so that's why we see this expert of the law. I'm sure the Pharisees or some kind of religious leader beforehand probably came up to him and convinced him of some way, probably maybe bribed him or some other way, say, hey, go and ask Jesus this question. So he does. So this is a time where they're trying to trap Jesus and trying to find something that they could use against him. But like I said, we're going to see Jesus answers in such a way that gives us such a valuable lesson for us today. So the expert of the law goes to Jesus, asks him the question, but then, Jesus turns it around and says, what does the law say? How do you read it? How do you interpret the law? And that's when he gives back to what we know as the greatest commandment of love your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and then your neighbor as yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. And those two commands, while separate, they're still equally important when regarding what is exactly the greatest command. But the expert of the law, like how we like to do a lot of the times, he's trying to justify himself, and he really starts to wonder, who is my neighbor? And I could just see it. I'm sure there was somebody in his mind where, he didn't like too well. Maybe he didn't like a co-worker too well. Maybe there was this, person that he knew that, were a friend of a friend, and he didn't like them too well. So he's like, well, if they're not my neighbor, I don't have to love them as myself. And we do that a lot of the times too. We try to wiggle our way around. God tells us, very straightforward at times, hey, do this. And we're like, do we really got to do that? Is there a way I can wiggle around? Like, God says, tithe, give a portion of what you make back to the church. And we're like, do we really? We got all these bills, we got to pay off all this debt. And for some churches, like, they have enough money. Why do they really need my money? We see we can really start to kind of wiggle around and try to give us an escape, and a way out of following this command. So the expert of the law trying to do this asks, who is my neighbor? And then, of course, Jesus, the answer that Jesus gives them is a parable. And it's probably an answer that the expert of the law and the Pharisees did not really want to hear. So let's take a look and break down this parable very quickly. So Jesus tells this parable of somebody who is traveling, and he gets, he gets mugged, he gets beat up by robbers. The Roman Empire, who is, Rome is in, command of Israel and several other countries around that area around this time. This is when, Rome is the big superpower of the world. And one thing that they actually did that actually benefited those who were under Rome is that they made this road system that made it easy for people to travel. Now, of course, with that, there comes some dangers, as along this road now you had robbers and thieves that would like to hide and kind of just wait for somebody to come along that they could ambush and they could attack and that they could rob. So in Jesus' parable, this is what we're seeing. We're seeing this guy probably traveling alone on this road, and that's when he gets jumped. So this is a very real life situation. This is something that could have actually happened to somebody in Jesus's time. And we see kind of the trend. This is why we see a lot of people traveling in groups in the Bible. If you just think about it, think about the wise men that came from the east to visit Jesus shortly after he was born. It wasn't just one wise man. It was, we don't know exactly how many, but we definitely know it was more than 3. So there's a big group of wise men traveling together to come meet Jesus after he was born. We also see that Jesus's family, and I'm talking about like not just Jesus's dad, mother, brothers and sisters, but even the extended family. So Jesus was traveling with his parents, his siblings, cousins, aunts, uncles. They traveled in big groups like that as they were traveling to the different festivals throughout the year. And then even if you think about it, Jesus had 12 disciples who traveled with him all the time. So they were in this big group of 13 guys as they traveled throughout Israel and the surrounding Gentile areas, spreading the gospel. So it's a very common thing. Like, it's a safety thing, really. How do we stay safe as we travel from one place to another? We travel in groups. But not so much for this guy in the parable. The guy in the parable comes across some robbers. They beat him and they leave him half dead on the road. So this is a situation where the guy can't really take care of himself. He can't just pick himself up and go to a hospital. He needs somebody else to come along and to help him out. And actually there were 3 people who walked by, but only one helped. And it's going to be a real surprise of exactly who came to help. But let's look at first at the 2 people who did not help him. First, a priest walked by and didn't help him. And you were thinking, well, surely a priest would help him, because a priest is one of God's workers. He served in the temple complex. He helped the people of Israel do their sacrifices and all of this stuff. Their prime duty, their main role, was to serve the nation of Israel and to serve God. So you're thinking, oh, this person must be someone who would come and help this traveler who got beaten up. No, he sees a traveler and then he goes to the other side and just keeps on walking. He doesn't even walk by the traveler. He tries to distance himself as much as he can and then continues walking. And then the second person is a Levite. While he's not a priest, he comes from the tribe that all priests come from. So if you're a priest, you're always if you're a priest, you're a Levite, but just because you're a Levite doesn't mean you're a priest. But Levites are the people that the priests are ultimately selected and they come from. So you're thinking, oh, this guy who, is raised in the tribe that is meant to have priests who are meant to serve God, you would think, oh, this guy would have a heart and to help somebody that is in need. But he does the exact same thing the priest does. He goes to the other side of the road and keeps on walking. But there was a third person that came and helped. And it's very, scandalous, I should say, of who this person was. The person who did come to help was a Samaritan. The Jews and the Samaritans despised each other. They just hated each other. And let me quickly go over why that is. First, the Samaritans were half Jewish and half Gentiles. If you know the mindset of the Jews already did not like the Gentiles. The Gentiles are foreign people. They don't follow God, and now they're ruling over them. And the Jews want their freedom, and they just do not like Gentiles. But now you have this group of people that has come about and into existence because Jews and Gentiles, married and have kids together. So to them, it's like you're tainting the bloodline of the Jewish heritage. Like, how could you? And the only thing I can, only thing I can think of this is kind of like today. If you ever know people who really love purebred dogs, like they don't like dogs who are mixed, and those mixed dogs are mutts. I grew up, every dog I've had as a kid was a mutt, and I just loved them, and it's just amazing. Some of the dogs that you can get that are mixed, but most people really don't care for mutts, and you can get a mixed breed dog at a pound for very cheaply compared to what you can get a purebred dog for. So it's kind of that same mentality, don't mix up the bloodlines, and we gotta keep it pure. So the Jews had this really big problem with the Samaritans, because it's like, oh, your parents, one of your parents was a Jew and the other one was a Gentile. And then of course there's other problems as this rivalry started to really form. The Samaritans made changes to the scripture, and it was really over the issue, where could you worship God? When Jesus comes and meets the Samaritan woman at the well, as Jesus starts to talk to her, she realized, hey, you are a prophet. And she asks him a question because she sees, oh, you're a prophet. Maybe you can help me answer this question I am wondering about. And it's recorded in John 4:19 through 20. It says, "Sir," the woman replied, "I see that you are a prophet. Our ancestors worshipped on this mountain, but you Jews say that the place to worship is in Jerusalem." And it's because in the scriptures that the Samaritans were using, they changed it and said, hey, we worship on this mountain. But then, you have the Jews in their scriptures saying, no, we worship God in Jerusalem. And so, one, it's not bad enough that, you're half Jewish and half Gentile, but now you're changing the scripture. You're changing God's word. So there's a lot of hostility between these two groups, and to the point to where they didn't even associate with one another. Earlier on in that little encounter between Jesus and the Samaritan woman at the well, John makes an editorial comment about the relationship between Jews and Samaritans at this time. So John 4:9 says this, "How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?" And then John adds this editorial comment on, she asked him, "For Jews do not associate with Samaritans." So John is putting that little comment in there to clarify, hey, these two groups do not associate with one another. So Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the well is a big deal, because the groups hated each other. And also, the Jews went to the extremes to avoid Samaria. So the place where the Samaritans lived, their little country spice, the Jews would purposely try to avoid it. If the closest, or should I say, shortest route to get to your ending point, like if you're traveling to get from point A to point B, if the shortest route went through Samaria, a lot of people will actually go around Samaria just to avoid it, because they did not want to enter the country where the Samaritans were. So you see this very kind of big stigma around Samaritans. So if you're a Jewish listener, you're not thinking of a Samaritan coming to help. When Jesus said it's a Samaritan coming onto the scene, you're like, he's not going to do anything. He's going to do the exact same thing that priest and Levite did, and he's going to walk on by. But he doesn't. He actually has compassion, and he takes care of the traveler. And he actually goes beyond what he had to do. He actually gave very sacrificially to help this traveler. Let me just point out the ways that he did it. Remember, he didn't just find him and then just like, hey, somebody come help me. This person needs help. It's like, hey, is there a doctor around here? Or he didn't just take him to the local hospital or whatever the Jewish equivalent would have been to a hospital back then. But no, he actually takes it upon himself to take care of this traveler. he bandaged his wounds. So he put oil on it to try to help heal it, and then just bandaged them up. When you get a cut, you put Neosporin and a Band-Aid on it, kind of the same idea. But not only that, then he, put him on his own animal and took him to an inn and paid 2 denarii, which is actually 2 days' wages. So think about working for 2 days and the amount of pay you get, and thinking about spending all that just to help somebody. I know if you're me, I'll be like white knuckle, like, no, this is my money. Like, I'm not going to spend that much to help this person. But the Samaritan in this parable does that. So, and then, like the next day, he, not the next day, but he gives that innkeeper 2 denarii, says, hey, take care of him, and I will come back and pay you I will pay you the money if the expenses for taking care of him exceeds that 2 denarii. So, if it costs more to take care of him and, get him back up on his feet, if it costs more than that 2 denarii, I will come back and you just let me know and I will pay the difference. So that is a very sacrificial and going well beyond what he had to do. And this actually reminds me a lot of Julia. Me and Julia are 2 different. We're like polar opposites at times when it comes to helping people. Julia wants to help anybody and everybody. Like, if she could, she would, just if you had a need and you told her, she'd be all up on it, like, let's go to the store, let's get them something. And I'm like, no, because we got bills to pay. If it was up to Julia, she would spend every cent in her bank account to help somebody. And I love that about her, and I hope that she never loses that compassionate heart of hers and just willingness to help others. And me, I just hope God works on me a little bit better to be more giving. And I think that's just a wonderful thing. Just God blessing me with a wife that is very compassionate and just really wanting to help others. So this Samaritan spirit is just really flowing from my wife. But that's a side point. I'm not trying to get brownie points. I just felt like throwing that in there. I even told her I was going to throw this in here, and she was like, okay, you can go ahead and do that. So I don't know if this serves her ego or what, but there it is. So application, what do we take away from this? And this is just one point that I want to kind of just leave, and I just want you to kind of meditate and think about. Everyone is our neighbor and deserves love. Not just those who look like us or think like us. Every human being is made in the image of God, and there's nothing that a person can do to make God love them less, and there should be nothing that a person can do that will compel us to love them less and not show them the mercy that they deserve. Think about the Samaritan. The Samaritan had every reason to not help this traveler. The Jews hated his people. They, tried to just purposely avoid them if they could. But that did not matter to the Samaritan. The Samaritan did not, give into the sinful nature and be like, well, he deserved it. Or, when's the last time that a Jew helped me? No, he goes well beyond what he had to do to take care of this traveler that needed mercy and compassion and love. So here's a hard question. Would we be willing to help someone in need? Now let me flesh this out a little. Would we help somebody that was in need if it was somebody like Donald Trump or Mike Pence? Would we help somebody in need if it was someone like Obama or Joe Biden? I got a feeling most people would help one over the other. Like, it would not be a problem, no hesitation. You'd be like, yeah, I would help Donald Trump, or yeah, I would help Obama in a heartbeat. But if you bring up that other person, they're like, do I really have to? Like, look at all these policies they did, and I don't agree with it. And the Bible speaks out against it. And I'm not saying anything. And yes, there are policies from every politician that I'm sure contradicts the Bible and contradicts God's way in one way or another. And that's a whole nother issue for a whole nother time. I'm just giving you this question to make you realize that it doesn't matter if it's Donald Trump or Obama, or if it's some supporter of Donald Trump or some supporter of Obama that is in need, that needs to be shown love and mercy. We are still called by God to sacrificially love others. Why? Because Jesus sacrificially loved us. Jesus did not come to this earth and be like, hey, you have to think like I do, or hey, you have to believe what I do before I die for you. No, Jesus went to the cross so that we can be reconciled back to God, and then God can start working on us and start changing us. Jesus did not come to earth and say, hey, you get your act straight, like, you see this checklist, I'll give you this checklist, and when you check everything off, then I will love you like I love my other disciples. No, he doesn't do that, and we shouldn't either. And it's very interesting. This kind of is another point. We're not to love those that are only in the church, but also love those outside of the church. Think about this. Jesus did not stay in the synagogues. He did not just love those who followed him, who believed in him. What did Jesus do? He deliberately went out and showed others the love of God, even those who would end up putting him on the cross. So the religious leaders and those people that, screamed, crucify him, Jesus deliberately went out and showed mercy and love to those people. And I think that's a real challenge to us today. So to wrap this up, I just want to give you 3 more Bible verses real quick so that you can meditate and you can think more deeply about what it means to love your neighbor. Romans 13:9 says, the commandments: do not commit adultery, do not murder, do not steal, do not covet, and any other commandment are summed up by this commandment: love your neighbor as yourself. Galatians 5:14 says, for the whole law is fulfilled in one statement: love your neighbor as yourself. So Paul understood what it meant to love your neighbor as yourself, and he saw that, if you want to sum everything up in a nutshell, everything in the Bible, if you want to sum that up into one sentence and how we should treat others, love your neighbor as yourself. And then, of course, Luke 6:27 through 28. But I say to you who listen, love your enemies, do what is good. Do what is good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you. And those are the words of Jesus. And I think those are very hard words to wrestle with, especially in the culture, in just the context that we are in now. But I pray that we will find ways to love those, even those that are hard to love. So let me pray. Dear Lord, just thank you for this time. Just thank you for this opportunity again, Lord. And just thank you for just really the safe delivery of Caroline and just the time we have gotten to spend with her, to just adjust with her. And I pray, Lord, that you will help us and you will guide us to raise her up to love you and to follow you. And I pray that, as people meet her and as people are involved in her life, that they will see, that she will see the love of Jesus through everybody, Lord. And I just pray that you just bless us as a family. But now I just pray that everybody who just listened to this sermon, who just listened to this lesson, Lord, I pray that they really wrestle with, how can I show my neighbors that I love them? And not just my physical neighbors, but how can I show people at the grocery store? How can I show people online, on Facebook? How can I show them the love of Christ? How can I show them mercy? How can I show them that I really care for them? And I'm not just viewing them as a number to add to my church roster, but that I genuinely care for them, that you, Lord, genuinely care for them. And I pray that we really wrestle with these questions as we start to try to become more like your Son, Lord. I pray all this in your Son's name. Amen.